Welcome to the CSBP Fertilisers Grow Better Podcast, sharing knowledge with growers on leading crop nutrition, sustainable agriculture and other issues impacting the agricultural industry.
G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the CSBP Grow Better Podcast. My name's Grey Johnston and I'm delighted to be joined today by Tash Teakle, co-founder and managing director of Agristart, who run the Harvest Agtech Accelerator program, which CSBP has been proud to be involved with for the last few years. After that very long intro, Tash, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Grey. Wonderful to be here.
Look, thank you so much for coming to join us and chat to people out there in podcast world. We normally begin, as is our custom, by getting our guests to introduce themselves and tell us who they are and where they come from and what they've been up to.
All right. Well, my name is Tash, like long walks on the beach. Oh, no, wrong podcast.
No, that's great.
No, I'm from Cunderdin, a little town in the wheat belt of WA, which some of your listeners might be familiar with. I now live down in Busselton, more in beef country, not so much wheat belt land. I've got a background as a scientist, worked, I guess, in academia as a research scientist for about 8 years before going to the dark side of commercialisation and got into, more around research innovation, which then led me to commercialising tech through our program Harvest. So I've been running my business for about 8 years now.
So you started as a scientist. In particular, you've got a PhD in plant biology. What sort of science were you doing? Was that ag-related?
Of course, yep. So I was looking at legumes for salt land. So it was when salinity was still cool before climate change took over, basically.
Has salinity completely lost its aura?
Yeah, it really has. No, we've still got salt land out there, but I think with the drying climate, it's sort of slowing the spread of salinity as well. But it's still an issue for a lot of areas, of course.
And so you're the co-founder of Agristart. What was it that prompted you to see that this was a thing that had a place in the market?
I think there was a lot of accelerator type programs connecting technology startups in the mining sector in WA and could see a real gap in the market that no one was doing this in agriculture. And there was a lot of tech startups out there who were trying to connect to growers, but they didn't, I guess, have the networks and they were designing technology without really validating it with their end user, which is the growers.
What is it that the organisation actually does?
Yeah, the main focus of our business is around startup innovation, mostly connecting technology startups to growers and really trying to commercialise, I guess, new technology that's going to make a difference on farm. That's at the core of our business. And we do that mostly through programs, directly helping startups, but also individual consultancy and some strategic work with government and corporate partners as well.
What sort of businesses are you supporting at the moment? Who's in the program? What sort of things are they looking at?
Yeah, well, we've just finished our 2023 program, and over the last 5 or 6 years now, we've had more than 70 alumni come through the program. And these are a mix of technology startups who come from a farming background, some who don't come from a farming background and completely new to agriculture and trying to apply technology, from the mining or defence sectors and seeing if there's an application in agriculture, and also researchers looking to commercialise their technology. So we have a real mix, and we also have alternative protein type food technology businesses, those working on innovations in robotics, automation, sensors, a real mix, which makes it interesting but also challenging because all the businesses are at different stages as well.
So there's a broad spectrum of things. Where do you draw the lines? Like, what do you consider as technology?
Yeah, I guess we sort of focus on innovation more so than just straight technology. And the key criteria for our programs is that they're working on something that is innovative, that is scalable, and is, of course, going to have an impact to growers. That's our 3 key criteria.
So have you got any favourite children? Like, what are the shining lights of the program over the last few years?
That is a very mean question, Grey, asking me to pick my favourite children. Look, we've had lots of success stories come through the program. Several of our alumni are actually, in the markets. People might know about there's Origin, there's Agora, Stratus Imagery, Whole, Eden Towers. There's so many, I can't name them all, but I think one thing I've already said to you, it's also what I measure as success of our program is the confidence and capability building that comes out of it. And even if the startups realise their technology might not be the right one, might not be as applicable to agriculture as they think, we help them with the connections and the capability building that they can go on and pivot and develop the next cool technology that will make a difference. So I think that's a really important outcome as well.
Absolutely. And of the ones that have been sort of had more success in the market, are there any common threads, or are there any things that link together what the ones that have been differentiated by finding a place in the market?
They have to be coachable. That is really important. It's not
The individuals, you mean?
Yeah. So founders must be coachable. It's not about, just doing whatever they're told to do. It's really about being able to listen, take on feedback, be open to new ways of thinking, being open to customer feedback, working with the customers from the start in designing the technology. That is really, really critical. And
So
I
when you
think,
say coach, it's not just listening to you, it's
No.
it's actually listening to the people whose products they're trying to serve. Yeah.
Exactly. So it is really that open-mindedness. And I think you're not going to be a successful founder without those traits.
Any other common threads?
Really important that they're working on the value proposition for growers. And this is something that we do see a lot of startups forgetting about. So they might have this really cool innovation that works in mining. They don't understand the grower decision making around adoption, and they haven't thought about the return on investment for growers or how they sort of measure value, which does tend to be around, I guess their gross margins. But farmers also really value things that make their life easier. Like, I can't tell you how many times farmers have asked me, well, when's there going to be an automatic gate opener that's really easy and we all have it, rather than just kicking their kids out of the ute to open the gate.
And why hasn't that one been solved?
I know, and there is people out there working on it. One of our alumni did work on it a few years ago as well, but I think it's just not probably at the price point yet where it's widely available. But the technology is out there.
So that takes us to, I think, perhaps a broader discussion of things that I'm interested in is the picture of, and I know you said Agristart is about innovation, not necessarily technology, but of the breadth of all the different agtech things out there that listeners to the podcast might have been familiar with, can you see which ones have most relevant to growers in WA, and what are some of the themes that you see as being relevant over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, look, I think robotics and automation is a big one that's coming in the future once the price point comes down. And this is one that's a little bit controversial because it's really hard in rural communities already. Everyone is worried about, the population of a lot of our country towns is diminishing rapidly, and people sort of have that fear that automation could make that even worse. But it's really about creating different jobs of the future. So, for example, my nephew who's 17, we never really thought he would be the type of, kid to go home on the farm. But if in the future, we need skilled engineers, we need robotics skills, we need software developers, I think it might change the types of skilled labour that we need in country towns. And, stories like Swarm Farm from Queensland, where they're actually growing this Agtech hub in this tiny little town in Queensland. I want to see more of that happening in WA as well.
And that robotics and automation story is, ultimately a response to challenges in getting skilled labour as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also around being smarter with our inputs. So making sure we're not being as wasteful with our chemicals as well, and a safety thing. So rather than working, 20-hour days during seeding and harvest, if we can have, some of our farmers watching their son's cricket on a Saturday morning and pressing a few buttons on their phone to make sure the robot's filling up, then I think that's a win for everyone.
And we've seen that kind of technology already permeate the market in a lot of ways already. If we're talking about auto steer or some variable rate application type technology, are there specific examples you see getting those kinds of traction in the market in the near term?
Yeah, and I think those sort of innovations still require a human driving it. So ideally what we want to get to is, less reliance on a person there all the time. And they might be obviously behind the scenes doing other bits and pieces, but also the refill, automating that refill. So I think that's probably an area for a lot of the robotics. They might be able to go out and spray a paddock, then you've got to be there to fill it up, but can we start to see robotics taking over in that space as well?
What are the barriers then to that happening? Like something around when we try and do things internally in our world at CSBP, often we find that it's data quality, for instance, that could be the issue, or it could be the interoperability of systems that could be the issue. Like, are those the kind of barriers that are stopping that automated refill from just happening?
Yes, definitely. So interoperability is a huge one. Integrating data from various sources is, of course, huge. But there is a lot of innovations out there. For example, companies like Pear Tree who are working on that part of the problem as well. So it's really exciting, I think, to see it all come together. And I think in the future, it will be a bit more plug and play. But then it's also training up the growers in this space and, growers are so used to adapting to new technology, I'm not as worried about that. But if it's a real change in how they're managing the farming system and a big system change, then that's going to take a bit longer.
The thing I'm always interested in understanding on the topics of interoperability or plug and play is like, who has the incentives to make that happen? And at the end of the day, it's the farmer, right? They would like to get their enterprise operating as productively and profitably as possible. We see this kind of tension in the market between different input providers or different machinery providers. Who's in the market? And maybe you mentioned is it Pear Tree? You mentioned a company before. Who's in the market helping to break down those barriers and providing the incentives to get the different input providers or the different machinery providers to work together and play together more nicely in the sandpit, for want of a better word?
Yeah, and look, and that's really tricky because you've got to be careful if there's no commercial incentive, there's going to be a real limitation to adoption, of course. And I think this is a role for GRDC, to be honest, as well. And I know they're investing heavily in this space. They've got the Big Grain Automate program, which is, tens of millions of dollars for this very reason, that there is potentially for the machinery companies no incentive potentially. I think that's changing, but there might not be the incentive for them to play nice. And I think where there's potentially grants and other programs where GRDC and other government money can facilitate that. I mean, we don't want government to, take over in that space or play where there is a commercial advantage, but facilitating things so that it's actually putting the technology and, most importantly, the data in the hands of farmers and farmers owning their data as well. I think that'll be really important.
Because the other, I guess that you can have a carrot approach, which is the commercial approach you've talked about, or a stick approach, which is kind of where right to repair type regulation has come into some areas of the market, and you could see that extending to different areas of data rights or data privacy requirements. Is that something that we see, or that you have any sense will be brought to bear in the Australian context?
I think where that will probably come into first place in the carbon space. So I think there's a lot of technology out there supporting emissions reduction in agriculture, and at the moment there's not quite the commercial incentive for growers to adopt a lot of it, but I think when the stick comes down, then it's going to be a lot of movement in that space, more than likely. So I would love to think it will be a commercial incentive before there's the stick, but the regulation's coming in New Zealand already, so it probably won't be far off here. So
we've had a very general discussion around the forces that might drive innovation there. I'm interested, you're focused mostly on, I guess, activity in WA that might then have applicability to other areas of Australia or even across the world. What is it about WA that you think makes it well placed to be a hotbed of innovation in the agricultural world?
Yeah, good question. And I've got a few thoughts on this, to be honest. One is that we have the shittest soils in the world. So I think that means we have the best farmers in the world. I'm very biased, obviously. All my family and a lot of my friends are farmers.
Yeah, and the best nutrient providers.
That's right, of course. So in my opinion, we have a lot of innovative farmers already, which means, they are adaptable and willing to try new things. We also have, the scale. I mean, there is obviously for companies wanting to trial things, our scale is very different to over east. So I think it's a really great opportunity. And also having that alternate hemisphere. So for Agtech companies in the US, when it's not the right season over there to come trial things here, I think that's another advantage as well.
Do we see that happen very much?
A little bit, yeah. And I think also that proximity to Asia. So I mentioned earlier to you about the opportunities for working with researchers and tech companies in places like Singapore, where they don't necessarily have the test beds or the customers for their innovations. So I think that's where WA can play a really important role.
Do we see examples of West Australian farmers or entrepreneurs or innovators working with partners in Asia?
A little bit more in the food tech space, I would say, right? And it's kind of...
That's something like a legume yogurt or something like that?
Yeah, that high protein stuff. And I think there's more of those companies going to Singapore where their market is a food product and the consumers are in Asia, and also the venture capital firms are in Asia because the investment scene's not as good in Perth. But coming back the other way, it's more those researchers and innovators in Asia that want WA farmers to be their customers. So it is a two-way thing.
So you mentioned the investment scene in Perth there, and that's something you're intimately familiar with. Can you paint a picture of, I guess, where is money coming from and who are the types of people who are interested in making these kind of investments? And then on the other side, who are the innovators?
There's lots of money in Perth, okay? Dig up some rocks and you'll be able to get money thrown at you. Lots of corporates are happy to spend up big on agricultural land, on mining discovery, but they're quite risk averse when it comes to technology. And the government's actually spent a lot of money in the medtech space, and that's that sort of improving investment into medtech. Agtech's been a bit slower, so it is a real struggle for a lot of the startups who are in what we call the valley of death, where they've got proof of concept, that they've tried it on a small scale, but they need to actually prove it would work at, say, a farm scale. And to prove it at commercial scale, especially for Agtech, which often has a lot of hardware, it's very expensive, those sort of trials. So to have that risk capital to get over that valley of death is a real challenge. And we do see a lot of our startups going over east or going to the US or Singapore, going elsewhere for that risk capital at that stage.
One of the things, my background before I worked in fertiliser at CSBP, I worked in retail businesses at Wesfarmers. And one of the things that was kind of fun there is that you can change something reasonably, you can change something and there's people coming through your stores every day. You can see whether that change has worked or not reasonably quickly, and you've got a big control set and you can muck around with stuff. In the world of agriculture, that's the experience is almost a polar opposite, because you only get one shot a year at having a go at something, and even then you may only get one season in 5 where the rainfall works or the frost thing that you're trying to test works or whatever it is, where you actually get to test the innovation. Is agricultural innovation just by necessity going to be slower because of that reason?
Exactly. And I remember having, my good friend Brad Jones from Tamman even said, I've only got like 20 seasons to get this right or something, because you don't have many times as a farmer. And, for technology companies wanting to trial things, you often do have to wait until it is the right time in the season, or making sure you're going over east or overseas to get multiple trials right. And I guess that's why a lot of our research in WA is done at that earlier stage, where you can do it in glass houses. It's a lot easier to get lots of trials done in a glass house, but proving something at commercial scale, there is a really long lead time in agtech. But you know what, medtech's similar. Like clinical trials in the medtech space can take 10 plus years to get things to market. So, it is common in other sectors as well. But we have the weather and other seasonality issues in agriculture, which makes it more challenging as well.
So Tash, you talked before about one of the big areas you see development coming is in robotics and automation as a way both to reduce costs and increase profitability through that vehicle, but also through improving the efficiency of inputs and therefore improving overall production and overall output and increasing profitability through that vehicle. Do you see, which side of the fence do you come down on in terms of agtech is the driver of, lowering costs and getting ruthless efficiency that way, or through optimizing production and increasing output for the industry? How do you see it, and which angle do most of your innovators tend to play?
Good question, Grey. And I think it depends on, their target customers. Is it the farmer that wants bragging rights at the pub about how good their yield is? Or is it the farmer that just wants to reduce, their inputs, get really great efficiency, improve their sustainability? But really it's both. So if you look at the work by Ross Kingswell, a really fantastic economist here in WA, he talks about the 1%ers, and it's all in relation to improving the gross margin. So if any of these technologies can, reduce costs by 1% or improve yield by 1%, the impact just compounds. So I think it's, there's opportunities on both sides is a long answer to that question.
No. And that certainly aligns with our philosophy at CSBP. So what else then can we be doing to support agtech innovators to help our farmers get those 1%ers in the WA market and in general, the global agriculture market that's important to keep the world all fed and sustained and happy? Yeah,
look, good question. And I think it's really hard for farmers in the agtech space. They're overwhelmed. I mean, there's so much information coming to farmers, whether it's around, fertilizers, herbicides, markets, everything. So having to then decide between 50 different sensors on the market is really challenging for them. So I think anything we can do to support trials on their farm, so helping, maybe their agronomists to trial things on their farm, hand in hand with them, so that they can really see those 1%ers coming through. So I think it's more support to trial things, because it is so risky when you're trying to implement changes on farm. So any support that potentially their agros can give them in that space, I think would really help.
Very nice. And that wasn't a reverse Dorothy Dixon, but we are very happy to be celebrating our 100 years of trials and research at CSBP. And look, we're very grateful to all the... I haven't been around the whole 100 years, but we're very grateful to all the farmers who've helped us, trial things on their properties over that period of time, and hopefully they've gotten some value out of it over the journey as well.
I think a lot of farmers do like having trials on their farm. To be honest, it's an excuse to show things to other farmers. I know my poor brother does get sent a lot of tech startups and researchers his way, and farmers do love showing people around their farms as well. So it's good for them to be challenged and also, to provide that feedback to the startups and the researchers as well.
Now, on the theme of Agtech, CSBP is excited that Evoke Ag is coming to WA in February next year. I assume you'll be there? I will definitely be there. I've had the privilege of being on the steering committee for Evoke Ag and really excited about it coming to WA. And one thing I really want to see is a bit of a legacy around this in WA. Let's hope that it's not just 1 week of excitement in WA. I really want to see the agtech industry grow in WA and build on the excitement from Evoke, and hopefully partnerships and opportunities for our tech startups will continue post Evoke as well. Now, we're recording this. Its harvest is just kicking off across WA at the moment. That may be of relevance to some of your... I meant Real Harvest, not your harvest program, but that may be of relevance to some of the businesses in the harvest program where they will be getting their yield data. Certainly, we're very interested in seeing what's happening in the trials program. What is happening in your world in the next little period of time? Yeah, we're going to take some of our harvest alumni to Singapore. So we're staying away from the poor farmers in WA at the moment. They're busy enough with their real harvest. So we're going over to Singapore for the Agri-Food Week and taking a delegation of 8 agtech startups to see what's happening around the world at that big conference. So a great opportunity for our alumni and also an opportunity to learn from researchers and innovators in the agri-food space from around the world. So really looking forward to that. And are they going to learn, or are they going to sell their wares, or a little bit of both? Both. So going there to learn, going there to pitch and sell, and hopefully bring back some novel innovations for WA farmers as well. That sounds wonderful. And look, on that note, I think that's about wraps it up for today on the CSBP Grow Better podcast. As always, out there in podcast world, please jump on our socials at CSBP Fertilisers to keep in touch with all the different things we're up to. And of course, remember to subscribe, rate and review the podcast. This will be our last show for 2023. So thank you to everyone who has stayed the journey with us over that period of time. And of course, thanks to all the guests we've had on the show, including Tash, for joining us today. Thanks so much. No, it's been wonderful to have you, and thanks so much for telling us all about what's happening in the world of Agristart and in the world of agtech in general. Until next time, see you all later. Have a good harvest. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. For more information about CSBP, please visit csbp-fertilisers.com.au or connect with us on social media at CSBP Fertilisers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn.